AMG are not playing around when it comes to the new GT63 Pro, and today is not only my first drive to find out all about the new track-focused model, but to really get under the skin with all of the engineering details. Plus, stick around as we're going to take a bonus look at the special one that I would choose to buy. Now, the Pro badge launched on the previous generation GT, but this time around there's even more to it, and we are going through it all. Having owned multiple AMG GTs myself and even driven a total of over 100,000 kilometers in them, I've been intrigued to experience the latest Pro, and I'm going to share my thoughts with you later on from the track here at Ascari in Spain. Hi guys, I'm Shmee. Hello and welcome back to the channel. The sun is coming out. This is more than just a bigger grille and a wing on the back. Let's get into it and experience and show you all of the details about the new AMG GT 63 Pro. What differentiates the Pro from the other AMG GT models? Because of course, some things immediately meet the eye, right? The new look at the front, but it's what's going on underneath the surface that I want to start by showing you around. All of these updates into the new model. And the first thing we should probably explain is, what does Pro mean? What is this Pro badge? We saw it previously on the car that I had, the AMG GT Pro, which was a very dynamic car to begin with, already the R variant of the AMG GT, and it made it even more so. It introduced manually adjustable suspension. You had a fixed roll cage and buckets, more of a stripped out car. So Pro is more about taking an existing model and making it even more dynamic. And in the case of the new GT, which is a very dailyable super sports car to begin with based on the SL platform, the 4MATIC Plus system, the V8 engine up front, but making it more at home where we are right now. You can still opt to add back in the rear seats to make it the 2+2. You can even choose the optional sunroof as well, but there's a lot more than that. So let's start at the very front. You've got this new fascia to the car, the new lower front apron. It wears this enormous front grille that we've seen introduced with the model, derived from that of the AMG GT3 race car and the GT Black series before as well. But in addition to that, you have much more by way of openings either side flanking it for the cooling. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to cooling for the extra power of the engine up front. Now, in addition, you have the active air panels inside, which open to allow more airflow in for the cooling. Down below, you've got active aerodynamics, which lowers a splitter beneath by 40 millimeters to help keep the car a little bit more positioned. And you also have the wind deflectors, the air deflectors around the side, which all contribute to reducing the lift on the front axle at 300 kilometers an hour by 30 kilos. So giving you a little bit more feel and a little bit more grip through the steering wheel. Come through to the wheels and tires, the configuration here. We've got this new forged cross-spoke design, 21-inch wheels, finished in Himalaya grey, the satin paint finish. This is an option. There are a few different options available. It's similar to the GTR Pro before. They're shod in 21-inch Michelin Cup 2R tyres, 295 at the front, 305 at the back. Cup 2Rs are a standard fit for this. You can opt to have the Pilot Sport S5 should you prefer, but the brakes, big talking point. You could opt for carbon ceramics on the GT63. This comes with carbon ceramics as standard, but they're actually different brakes. It's the same caliper. They are the largest brakes that AMG do, 420 millimeters, but it's a different disc and a different pad as well to the standard setup that you would have on the AMG GT. The whole idea behind this is it's still your usable car, but it's with a twist. So come around towards the back. This is where we've got the fixed wing. As we saw on the earlier versions, this adds 15 kilos of downforce at the back. So just that little extra touch up at higher speeds. And of course, there's the badge. There's the badge worn right here that we saw on the GTR Pro. And that's a big part of it. It gives you the idea, the mindset, the thought of what all of this car is actually about. But what's happening that you can't see? Let's talk about that. I mentioned that there are additional radiators down in the front apron. Normally the GT63 would have one on each side. There are two on each side here because all of these different elements have different roles. The car has significant upgrades for braking, for cooling, and for aerodynamics. And to explain a little bit more of this, we can actually come over and take a look at some of these graphics on the pit wall over here, because it will make more sense of everything that they've done. So at the front of the car, it's guided into three different directions. On the inside, you have the dedicated airflow that goes through towards the brake cooling and additional channels underneath the car. In the center part, it goes through towards the wheel arch cooler. You have different coolers now, differentials, and also on the transfer case. And then on the outside, it's the airflow that's directed around to help with downforce, keep the front end a little bit more planted. Underneath the car, take a look at this. These are all the parts that have been updated, shown here in blue. You've got the extra cooling happening for each side. You've got the new discs, as I mentioned, and you've also got these strakes, these air directional vanes underneath the car, which are all to do with managing this airflow and everything that happens around it. So So beyond that, you do have the 9-speed AMG 9G speed shift gearbox. You've got this engine, as I mentioned, with a little bit more power. So this is again to help cool that. In fact, power now goes up to 612 horsepower from 585 before, and torque goes up from 800 newton meters to 850. To give you some perspective of this, that means at 0 to 200 kilometers an hour, 124 miles an hour, it can do it in half a second quicker, down to 10.9 seconds. You still have the functionality like being able to put it into drift mode, so make it completely rear-wheel drive should you wish, or you can drive it in the four-wheel drive settings where it sends up to 15% to the front to obviously give you that extra performance, that earlier grip, stability and safety and everything that connects with it. You've got some upgrades to the active ride control, the suspension system. In terms of the previous models, it's actually continued through from the GT63 into the Pro, but the idea here is that this car is at home on a circuit like this. So should we go drive here at Ascari? Let's do it. Here we are, Ascari circuit, this private members track in the Ronda Valley in Spain. As you can see, it's been raining pretty heavily today and we're on Cup 2R tyres. There are some parts of the track that are still a little bit damp, so I need to watch out and be reasonable with it while we have some warming up, sighting laps, a bit of lead follow. I'm in Sport Plus at the moment, we'll turn it up to race in a second, but I tell you what, similarly to so many of the AMGs, this is very confidence inspiring straight away. You hop in and you can absolutely barrel around. Of course, I've got it in full automatic at the moment. You have AMG dynamics, the suspension, everything that you can adjust and change. But here at Ascari, there's a lot to watch out for. There's quite a lot of undulation, a lot of things going on, learning the track a little bit. I've been lucky to drive here a few times before, but still, just need to get the eye in, figure out what we're doing, because we are hurtling around here at quite some pace already. That's probably the amazing takeaway of this straight away, is that it's very, very comfortable to drive really fast. I am very happy in here immediately. Left foot braking, nicely positioned, and just going with it. Going with the flow, enjoying what the GT Pro is all about as we come round to complete the first lap, where I'm going to turn it up into race mode and get ready for what's next. Oh, I tell you what, it's a big smile on the face driving this thing. It just launches between every twisty section of the Ascari circuit. Heavy braking zone here. You got to watch out because there's a lot of grass around here that is of course a bit wet today, so we don't really want to go flying across that at any point. Now, being an AMG with the touch controls on the steering wheel, I can pop it into manual, which, I tell you what, it's a bit of a double-edged sword because I am loving the automatic gearbox, but I want to show you something new they've introduced. That beep, for the first time, the upshift indicator beep has been added. Of course, the idea behind that is to keep your eyes on the road and have an audible notification of time to shift to the next gear, rather than be staring at the rev counter or running purely off hearing the engine revs. You can actually disable it though. If you wish to have none of that, you can press one click of the exhaust mode button and it will turn that back off. I think though actually I want to have it in automatic because the gearbox does such a good job of this. There's really no need to pop it up into manual. It's absolutely honed in. Now, my seatbelt has pulled very tight on me, presumably safety system from braking and the car in front being very close, but it is absolutely suffocating me into the seat right now. Probably a good thing from a safety point of view, but it's also quite intense, I'm not going to lie. The four-wheel drive system just means you can plant your foot down and away you go. Absolutely flies. I mean, this down here, going through this corner at what, 180 kilometers an hour, something like that? 170s, 200, 210, 220, 230. Go through here at what, 227 kilometers an hour, I think I saw on the dash there. And it's very easy to pilot it really fast. Borrow the shortcuts. The undulations here are amazing. We are flying. We are absolutely flying around the circuit here. While we cool it down back to the pits, this is just in four-wheel drive, right? Remember, you can switch it to being rear-wheel drive and have a 600 horsepower rear-driven AMG sports car for all of the sideways action and fun, hooligans and shenanigans. But for most purposes, you're going to drive it like this because this is where it really excels. This is where you'll get the fastest lap times, the best performance from it. And I just feel right at home straight away. That's the impressive thing right now. Just hop in, go. Before sharing with you the other car that I'm quite excited to show in a moment and go and drive even more laps in anger with the GT Pro, I want to rewind for a second the backstory of this car and in fact the 4 previous AMG GTs that I've actually owned to date and where in the world some of them have ended up. This might be a bit of an unexpected surprise. They've gone a long way from home, but my first was the GTR. Back in 2017, we'd thought it might become the Black Series, but it was this new R designation. I was so excited about it, and for Collection Day, I was joined by none other than then reigning Formula One world champion, Nico Rosberg. A day I would never forget, and go on to drive so many more miles with the car, trips across Europe in the snow, of course laps at the Nürburgring, and in total about 19,000 miles. That's around 31,000 kilometers, before upgrading it 2 years later to the then newly introduced predecessor of the car we're seeing today, the GTR Pro. Now that car was one of 750, a limited edition, the livery over the diamond white paint, some similarities to what we're looking at today, but I didn't drive it all that much. Of course, some laps at the Nürburgring, I got it out around Europe, but in total only about 3,000 miles, that's around 5,000 kilometers, because I had it alongside what's coming next. But I actually sold it, and where it ended up is completely across the world in Australia, literally the other side of the planet. So I had the GTR Roadster as well, again one of 750 the year later, but I drove that car a little bit more. I'd swapped out the original seats for the bucket seats from the Pro and the Coupe, a seat I particularly like, something you couldn't get from factory, and I drove it around 7,000 miles, that's about 12,000 kilometers, before of course it moved on where it has now ended up, believe it or not, in Sri Lanka of all countries. Of course then came the Black Series, the legend. I repainted it in the famous AMG solar beam paintwork and have driven it all around the world, to the Middle East, through Dubai, Abu Dhabi, it's been to the US, in fact through 32 states around the country, before also going out to the Trans-Fagurashan Highway in Romania, to the Transalpina filming bears, and even up to the AMG Driving Academy in Arjeplog at the Arctic Circle at the top of Sweden. Of course, adding all of those up though comes to 66,000 miles, about 108,000 kilometers in total driving them. It's safe to say the AMG GT is a car that I know pretty well, but then the new model arrived and it's very different in many ways. It doesn't have that extraordinarily long elongated front end, that feeling of being sat right on the rear axle, because it changed in favour of moving to the SL's platform. It was introduced a little over a year ago with the GT55 and the GT63, the 4MATIC Plus system, the 4-litre V8 being retained, but introducing a new 2+2 seating configuration, a lot more luggage space, making it a more usable, dailyable car, but in some ways detracting a little bit from the experience that I loved of the AMG GT in the process. Now, of course, to talk a little bit more about this, it's loaded with technology. There's a lot of very cool stuff going on. And if I open up the boot of the car as well, just to pull the button in here and show you this, back there, you can take a ton of stuff with you, which you couldn't necessarily do in the predecessor. You could take some decent things with you, but this is what it's about. And the Pro has the option of having the back seats or doing without them, but you can fit some golf clubs in here. You can take a lot of stuff, believe me, with you on the road. Now, as well as the 55 and the 63, came along the GT63S E-Performance, the crazy powerful hybrid. And this car borrows some features from that, like the tailpipes that you have at the back. But this is a different prospect. That is ultimate, let's say, straight line performance. This is more about the dynamic type of driving. This is more the kind of thing I like. But it's not as extreme as the GTR or the GTR Pro of the predecessor. And I think that's the hard thing to understand about the positioning of it. As an AMG GT lover, I haven't opted for one yet, but I'm interested to see what happens down the line. And of course, getting out and driving this a little bit harder right now. off we go again. Time to drive in a little bit more anger. It's drying fast, mostly dry circuit now, and Ascari here with the AMG GT 63 Pro. I guess I should state the obvious, there's a lot of piped in engine sound in the cabin. I'm sure you can hear that, I'm sure you can barely hear me in fact, because it's very loud. I remember this first feeling with the GT Black series. Obviously takes some getting used to. And outside, not the loudest thing in the world, but you know what? To still have a V8, it is what it is. Regulations for a big company like Mercedes. The rules they have to follow, hey? A point that I should state about this is that we're driving laps after laps, and the brakes, no signs of any giving up or fading. Obviously the carbon ceramics helping significantly considering the weight and the heat, and that's the whole idea behind them, to give you more longevity, performance for longer, not fading away. A couple of laps on regular brakes and you would basically be done. This thing is so quick for what it is, and it's so easy, relatively speaking, to drive it really quickly. That's probably the craziest thing here. Just gets an absolute move on. This is the wetter part. Yeah, every lap. Oh, the G-forces through there. I am absolutely impressed with the performance here. Absolutely blown away by this. It's so fast. Of course, the four-wheel drive, there's a tiny bit of understeer here and there, but in race mode, the turning is sharp. Pointed, off you go. The suspension with the AMG Active Ride Control does a great job as well. I can see why they didn't really need to change anything there, because just point and go, right? Bumps over some of the curbs nicely. Even if you're running a little bit wide, small dab, all of the TC aids, controls that you could imagine are here as well. And we have our last cool down lap. I'm quite pleased with that. I think I drove well, if I can say so myself. All complimentary, of course, to the car, which makes it a significantly easier job than in some others. But what a nice package. If you want the car that you can use for your commute, for occasionally lugging the kids and some stuff around, but also turn up to a racetrack and have some fun like this, because that's quite an experience. It's done a very nice job of just lapping this up, just eating up the tarmac. Great pace and very rewarding, a lot of fun as well. It's a great circuit, and what a car to have driven it in. Fresh from some pretty hardcore laps out on track at Ascari, AMG have kept something hidden, which we can now take a look at. Check this out. The Motorsport Collectors Edition of the GT63 Pro, limited to only 200 cars in total around the world, inspired like the AMG 1 and the GT Black Series Project 1 edition that was available only for AMG 1 customers. This wears a livery inspired by the W14 from the Mercedes-AMG Petronas Formula 1 team. So you've got the hand-painted stars back here. In fact, the way that this is done is actually by painting the panels silver, then using lasers to line up where they go, masking taking off all of the stars because the positioning needs to be absolutely perfect, then painting on top the obsidian black before then adding the Petronas turquoise colorway accents that you have around the car. For example, around the windows, the wheels are satin black with the same coloring again, and even down here you've got the AMG Fulterback crest painted on the car also. Now these actually come with a very high specification as standard, so all of the exterior carbon fiber, the night package, you've also got things like the Cup 2R tyres, the AMG performance seats, you've got the Burmester sound system, you've got a ton more, and there are extra details as well on the inside to come and show you. Obviously with the light right now it's pretty hard to see, but come and take a look in here at this as well, because we have the performance seats, as I mentioned, with the turquoise stitching on them going around. Very high spec everywhere in here. We've then got the door entry sills with the AMG crest and everything else around them as well. So as a special launch edition, I mean, imagine a collection with an AMG 1, a GT Black Series Project 1 edition, and these. And the thing about them is that they're available globally as well. So those 200 cars include the United States. I think the UK gets a number that you can actually count on one or maybe two hands. It's not a whole lot of cars. This is clearly the one to have, the one to collect. I actually really like it. I don't normally like black cars. I think this looks brilliant. Done a very nice job with it. I can't leave today and not show you the engine. Let me just pop this open, and quickly, by the way, there's also a plaque there. 1 of 200, Motorsport Collectors Edition. But come round, because of course, 4-litre bi-turbo V8 that's squeezed into the front of this, all very tightly packaged, but with 27 horsepower up from the predecessor, 50 Newton meters up as well. Obviously even more punch that it packs, but obviously a lot of that sound, like I said, while driving, coming through the speakers. It's the one thing that slightly draws back, even though these do obviously sound good. It's an 8-cylinder power plant with the handcrafted badge that's worn on there as well, and does look good. The hot V with the turbos sitting on the inside of that 8-cylinder lump in the front of the Motorsport Collectors Edition. Of course, the GT launched as well with the new crest, as opposed to having the Mercedes star. It wears the Fulterback crest on the nose of, well, all new AMG models from this point onwards. There are a lot of AMGs around here. In fact, the car's all being prepped for the next outings, lots of other drives. But to keep this conclusion short, is it a replacement for the GT Black Series of the previous generation? That's not the purpose. This is your car that you can use normally much more daily. Well, I say that because obviously I drive my GT Black Series far too much for that kind of car. This is a different ethos. There will presumably be more dynamic versions to come down the line, but for the time being, I've been very impressed by driving this, what it offers, the details about it. The point I will make is that it is a very expensive car once you've added lots of options and spec'd it up into a new territory, really at the top of that. But today has been epic to drive it. I hope you've enjoyed this first look. Awesome to check out the Motorsport Collectors Edition. If you like these kinds of videos, do check out the video right over there as well for plenty more on the Shmeemobiles 50 channel. That's it for now though. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again very soon. Cheers!